Hello, everybody. I wanted to welcome you to the Albuquerque Journal, and this is our inaugural Town Hall series. I'm Yay! Thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you to District Attorney Sam Bregman for being our guinea pig in this series. We really wanted to, and by the way, I'm Executive Editor Jay Newton Small, and when I came to the Journal about a year ago, it was my first experience with editorial boards. My background was in journalism, was at Bloomberg News and Time Magazine, and neither of those publications had editorial boards. And so for me, this was a whole new experience. And I was sort of intrigued by this process of people coming in and talking to us, and it was all very kind of behind the scenes, but they were always really great conversations. And somehow, when we did editorials, people were often really puzzled on how we landed in that space and why we wrote about this editorial this way and what happened there. So I wanted to open up the process and really bring Albuquerqueans and New Mexicans into the room and allow them to see what an editorial board looks like, how we discuss things, the questions we're going to ask, and essentially be able to be a part of it. So not only are we here tonight with this wonderful audience, and we're really excited to have you guys here at the Journal, and we hope this becomes a regular thing where you guys can come and experience these editorial boards with us. By the way, the next one will actually be Duke Rodriguez, who is a gubernatorial candidate on March 30th. But I should say, to be precise, that this particular event is not about the gubernatorial race. It's actually about Sam's work as a DA and coming out of the legislative session and what's going on with crime in Bernalillo County. That said, I cannot control all of your questions, and I'm sure that that some of these issues will come up. And so already on our submission form, we have about 6 or 7 questions having already to do with the gubernatorial race. So I think it'll be a lively discussion about a number of issues. We're going to start with Sam with a group of slides. This is pretty typical for an editorial board. Usually the folks come in, they have a bunch of slides, a bunch of data and information they want to share with us. They'll usually hand us a packet. And so to get a sense of what the packet looks like, we've got it up here on the screen and over there on that screen for those on that side. And I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves before I will then introduce Sam to you guys and let Sam take it from there. So thank you again for being here. Thank you to everybody on the live stream. I understand we're streaming this on YouTube, on KKOB, and on Facebook. I encourage everybody in those formats to ask questions. And here in the room, you guys all should have been given index cards. If you don't, you can find them. They're somewhere around here. And we will bring them to you. Just raise your hand. There are also pens here. If you want to write down questions, just write your name down and then submit them. Just hold up your hand with the card, and someone will come and grab that card and deliver it to me, so I will ask questions for you guys, okay? And with that, I'm going to let my team introduce themselves, and then we'll go on to Sam and the main show. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you, Sam, for participating. Really appreciate it. I'm Jeff Tucker. I've been a member of the editorial board for a little over 6 years. We've probably had 200 or 300 editorial board meetings in that time, and this is the first one that's been open to the public, so I'm really excited about it and want to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, and I'm Ryan Botel. I'm the opinion editor. Been in this position for about a year, and I recognize a lot of your names because I get letters and speak-ups and all sorts of op-eds from you, so it's nice to put a face to the email. So thank you all very much for being here.
Good evening. My name is Nikayla. I'm a reporter at the Albuquerque Journal, and I currently cover crime. I am not on the editorial board, but I typically write the stories that you guys read about them after. So thank you guys all for joining us, and you can also get a story tomorrow if you didn't absorb everything today. So thank you guys.
And I just want to say, normally when we have these editorial boards, we're sitting around a table and it's round, so this is kind of an awkward way of doing it, but we wanted to be able, for the audience, to be able to see the slides. And usually Sam's staff would be at the table, and generally others, like our publisher and Bill Lang, who's here in the front row. But for the intents and purposes of this particular event, you've got Sam over here by himself looking very sad.
I'm happy.
But we're excited to have you here, and Sam, take it away.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for making the time to be out here. This is great, and thank you to the Albuquerque Journal for this opportunity to be a guinea pig. I really do appreciate it. You know, I have prepared and want to just kind of put things in context. So whenever I go in front of an editorial board, or for that matter, any group, I want to be well prepared. So I put together a couple of slides, and that's what I'm going to be showing to you all today to put things in context about crime in Bernalillo County, specifically about how it's affecting people and what our office specifically is doing. And I think that's really important that you hear from the district attorney himself about how we're doing. I know there's a legislator or two in the room, and I just want to give a shout out because since I took office in 2023, and at that time, the district attorney's office had a budget of $29.6 million here in Bernalillo County. And as of this year, right now, we have a budget of $40.2 million. That's a 36% increase. And I have been going to the legislature for 3 years saying the one thing you can do more than anything else to fight crime is to fund law enforcement and fund prosecutors' offices. In fact, fund all three legs of the justice stool, if you will, whether it's the courts, the public defender's office, and obviously the prosecution as well. And the legislators have really done that for me, and I'm very grateful, and I'm grateful to the governor's support for this as well. And I just want to talk about the growth in my office since then. Back in 2022, before I became DA, it was 16,000 or 17,000 cases referred to my office. And last year in 2025, we had 26,000 cases referred to our office from law enforcement. That is an amazing amount of growth. And that's a credit, by the way, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention this because of today. I was at the funeral of Deputy Schlotzman, and I think we all, this entire community, mourns his loss. And it's another example of how hard a job and how dangerous a job law enforcement has in our community. You never know, and I'm just very grateful to every single member of law enforcement out there who do an amazing job. So describing the volume growth in our office, next I want to talk about crime trends a little bit, and there's no secret, I got this right off the police department's website, but we've been seeing the same thing. The good news is the crime is down. This is not a victory lap, and I'm not suggesting to you that it is a victory lap, but there are good things to talk about a little bit. And of course, nationally, we know that crime is down, on a downward trend, but violent crime in Albuquerque is down 26%, property crime down 34%, and if you look at some of these, homicide is down by 34%. Aggravated assault down 11, robbery down 22, rape down 9, burglary 14, vehicle theft is down 43%, shoplifting is down 63%, felony arrests are up 33%, felony warrant arrests are up 16%, and misdemeanor warrant arrests are up 136%. So I can tell you that overall, those are some good numbers, and those are some good things happening in Albuquerque and in Bernalillo County, and I'm really pleased with it. My office specifically, I want to get into some of the particulars real quick for you. Our pretrial detention. It should be pointed out that my office has filed more pretrial detention motions than at any time in the history of that office. And as you can see, there's been a steady increase on the number of defendants who are held. Pretrial detention has been a hot button issue since I've been DA, and in fact before that. And we all know the difficulties in making sure we hold violent people in custody pending trial, and it's been a focus of our office, and we continue to see an increase. Cases to the grand jury obviously going up as well. The reasons I point that out is because the amount of work our office is doing is really quite amazing. Some of my various divisions, general crimes, in 2025 alone opened 3,682 cases. These are your general felonies, whether or not it's trafficking drugs, possession of drugs, stealing, retail crime, and I know that, and I think Representative Matthews is in the House here right now already, but there was a organized retail crime bill that came out a couple years ago. This gentleman has paid the price of his conduct, but also that legislation helped do this. Raul Garcia was convicted. He was responsible for at least $50,000 worth of losses to local retailers, and he's been sentenced to 9 years in DOC with the help of that law. And that, I think, is an example of when legislation that really moves the needle is enacted, we can do a lot of things with it. Next, our Metro Court Division. That's where our rookie lawyers come into the office, many of them that just got out of law school and start their legal careers. And we're really proud of the training program that we've established. the curriculum that we work in hand with the law school on, and we've now developed a pipeline so that lawyers that want to practice in the justice system and want to be prosecutors have an ability to come out of law school and go right into a great prosecutor's office. We have trained dozens of attorneys, and we really do have a top training program. As you know, the DWI scandal that's rocked this community over the last several years has been front and center on your front page of the newspaper a lot. I do want to point out those numbers, though. Our office hasn't slowed down a bit. In 2023, there was 2,117 open DWI cases, and there was 2,358 in 2025. Our conviction rate last year was 84% of those 2,358 cases, and that's something I'm very proud about, and we have some really great attorneys working every day on that. Our Metro Division also handles misdemeanor DV cases. Those numbers continue to grow. Our shoplifting cases opened, and I think that's
What are DV cases?
domestic violence. I'm sorry.
Thank
Good
you.
question. I'm sorry. I shouldn't talk in the slang or lingo of the office, but domestic violence cases. Our shoplifting cases, we've obviously seen a huge increase in shoplifting cases. And before I got there, our office didn't even prosecute misdemeanor shoplifting cases. Now we enter an appearance on every single shoplifting cases, and I think it's paying off in some of the numbers. Moving right along, and I don't want to take too much time. I'd rather ask questions, but I do want to continue to talk about the office. Our major crimes division. There were 165 homicide cases referred in 2025. Those are bigger than the actual number of murders because they closed out older cases. They sent us cases that they thought may or may not be ready for prosecution. But since 2023, my office and the amazing staff, prosecutors, and support staff there have convicted over 300 people of homicide. That's a lot of people. That is a great number for the sense of shows how hard we're working, but it is a sobering number to show how much violence there was in our community over the last several years. Our average caseload, when I came in, our homicide prosecutors had 50 cases apiece. Those aren't easy cases. You don't walk into a courtroom with a file the day before and just say, all right, we're ready to go. They take a tremendous amount of work. We are now down, our average caseload for homicide prosecutors is now 23. That makes a big difference in the kind of justice we get, because the thing about prosecutors are we're supposed to go out there and literally present the best case we can and then let a jury of our peers make the decision on guilty or not guilty. And this gives us the opportunity where it's not so crushing on each specific prosecutor. Next, I want to talk about our Special Victims Unit. It is an amazing, amazing unit. It deals with some of the most difficult cases there are. It is child abuse, child sexual assault, and rape of adults. This unit deserves special attention all the time because of the work they do, the difficulty they do. They've had over 275 convictions. Not a lot of people plead guilty to hurting or raping a child. So these cases go to trial all the time. I think one of them told me they have 13 trials before the end of April that are currently scheduled. I mean, that's the kind of workload they carry, and they're not easy on your own personal mental health if you're a prosecutor. I know that I personally helped prosecute Danny Aldaz in the courtroom. He was a second-grade teacher accused of molesting second graders, and he's spending 57 years in prison. Our SACI unit, if I can move right along. Some of you may know what this is, Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. It is our cold case rape cases. We have, as you can see, convicted over two dozen people in cold case rape cases in the last 3 years. This individual that there's a picture of, Mr. Martinez, he was a former APS bus driver. He pled guilty, and by the way, our special agents in my office got his DNA off the steering wheel so we could match it up of driving that bus, and that's how we caught him. And he pled guilty to raping 3 women from 1988 to 1991. Now, obviously, that's justice delayed in many ways, but it's also we got justice. And I'm very proud of our SACI unit. They do amazing work as well. We have doubled the size of our victim advocates in our office. We feel it's so important that we make sure we're doing everything we can to support our victims and survivors in a tremendous amount of cases, far too many. We have continued our community outreach, and we have established a very specialized, what is called a DV team, a domestic violence team up there for complex cases, and it is, our victims advocates do an amazing job. We've established, since I started, a gun violence reduction team. We've got the initial funding from the Sentencing Commission. I'll always be grateful for that. Back in 2024, it focuses on 18 to 25-year-olds. I know we're going to talk about juvenile crime at some point today, but those that they don't, unfortunately, at 18 to 25 is the largest group of gun violence right now we're seeing. We've opened since March of 2024, 400 cases involving guns, and mostly 90-some% of them are 18 to 25-year-old in these specific cases. I've been working, obviously, in the schools, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, and targeting and trying to work with our community the best we can. And we are doing a lot of work on the extreme risk firearm protection orders, or some people know them as the red flag law. We have been working on that a lot, because when kids get caught with guns, we don't want them to go home to a house that's full of guns, so they have more access to them again. Our CSU, we've really beefed up this part of the district attorney's office. We've added over 15 sworn law enforcement officers. They've made 307.
CSU stands for.
Oh, I'm sorry. Crime Strategies Unit. They're sworn law enforcement officers, and those sworn law enforcement officers assist prosecutors with following up on investigations, but also go out and hunt people who have felony warrants. And they do an amazing job. We have far too many warrants. We still do out there in the community. And every day, more warrants get added. So they're out there doing everything they can. We ran out, they basically helped coordinate and participate in our office, did an Operation Route 66. And that was in just 8 months, they had over 1,500 arrests. 15 people were arrested on homicide-related charges. Most of them are outstanding warrants related to homicides. We had 598 offenders during that, and most of that was up in the International District, if you're familiar with that area of town. 1,023 offenders on supervision at the time of the arrest. That's 65% who were on some kind of order on the courts, and of the people that we arrested again at the time when they were arrested. We cleared 1,397 warrants, and by the way, that was working not just with our agents, but state police, BCSO, probation and parole with the state of New Mexico, and APD towards the end of it as well. We see cleared, it means you arrest someone who has an outstanding warrant, and then they go in front of a judge, and that warrant's cleared. It's no longer an outstanding warrant for their arrest. 117,442 fentanyl pills were seized, 6,000 grams of meth, 145 firearms, and 142 stolen vehicles recovered. Another thing we do that's really important in my office is pre-prosecution diversion. We divert a lot of people because we know, and I know, and my office knows, that some people would never be in the criminal justice system if it were not for their addiction to drugs. They got addicted one way or the other, and now their brain's telling them, just get me another bunch of that drug so that I don't feel the pain I feel or whatever it might be going through. We know they would never have shoplifted if they weren't so addicted to drugs. So we try and divert them as much as possible. My office goes after the traffickers all day, every day, that are willing to put the poison out on the streets. But at the same time, the people who are just basic addicts, let's get them the help they need, because I can't prosecute by myself, or this office can't, or all the prosecutors combined in the state of New Mexico cannot prosecute our way out of the fentanyl issue. We have to go after the drug traffickers, but we have to get that addiction recovery system up and running so that it makes a difference. Now, our specific diversion program, we've offered 973 people a pre-prosecution diversion. That means if you comply with getting off, getting treatment, getting the things you need to do, showing up at our office once a week or twice a month, we're going to dismiss that case eventually when you complete that. And we made 973 offers in 2025. We had 217 graduates in 2025. 693 people have successfully completed that program, and there's only a 6.7 recidivism rate. And that's success right there, right? That is success. And we have an amazing amount of people in my pre-prosecution diversion program that care deeply about our community and work hard. It's not just prosecutors putting people away. It's people in my office helping people. And I'm very grateful for that. Needless to say, after HB 8, competency has obviously become a very major issue. I think many of you know the issues that we face in our criminal justice system. We have a competency team that's up and running now at our office, and we are focused on dealing with people. They're so complex sometimes, the cases, and people who are just, they're struggling with mental illness to a real extreme, and they keep ending up in the criminal justice system. We try to reach in and grab them out of that criminal justice system and get them the help they need. We work with APD, BCSO, and others to try and identify them, find them so that they're not continuing to repeat. And some of them end up in our homeless communities. We know that. This is a real issue. We've done 9 civil commitments so far. Civil commitments, not criminal commitments. 1 was an emergency order. 2 were referred. We got up to the New Mexico Behavioral Health Institute up in Vegas. And then 3 got out because there were no beds anywhere. Or at least there was none that were able to handle them. We've handled over 400 competency cases originating now from both Metro and District Court. It is a real issue, and we have to get our behavioral health issue fixed in this entire community. There's so many good people working on that issue, but the coordination is so lacking, and maybe we can talk about that more some as well. Just a couple more things. I'd like to brag about this. We were ranked as one of the top 10 best places to work in New Mexico. I'm very proud of that. And that's a testament to the wonderful leadership that's my chief deputies, my deputy district attorneys, and the whole office does an amazing job being really great leaders. But there are things that I can tell you there is certainly room for progress, and I won't be bashful about this. It's the one thing that keeps me up at night more than anything else, and it's juvenile crime. We have so many kids committing violent crime with guns still. All those other numbers, when I showed you at the beginning, that are going down, juvenile crime is going exact wrong way. And here are some of these numbers. So these are cases we were referred in the years, and you've seen how they go up. I've charged with homicide. This is an unbelievable number. 77 kids with homicide. That's crazy. It's 6 of them this year. I've charged 6 kids this year with homicide. Firearm-related offenses. In 2024, we had 155. Last year, we had 174. My office, I have directed that we don't offer juveniles involved with gun crimes a plea offer unless they tell us where the gun came from. Not only about a third, maybe sometimes it's a little bit more, are willing to tell us that. But we now have ongoing investigations on people who are supplying kids with guns. And we've got to stop this. It is a real concern, and I can get into all the specifics if you like. Listen, as much as I want to say how grateful I am to the legislature, I do want to tell you I still face some challenges all the time with getting certain things through our legislature that I think would be a big difference. Felons in possession. These are felons who are willing and get caught carrying a firearm. This is a huge issue. The U.S. attorneys and the federal law has a huge hammer as far as the number of years they can put felons in possession away. But their capacity is very limited. And we don't have, I think, enough years for these individuals. We have charged last year 345 felon in possessions. but the penalties simply are not, I don't think, a big enough deterrent. And that's why I've been very adamant about changing our felon in possession law. We had HB 49, I believe was the number, and it never made it in the Senate, never made it to the Senate, or when it did, there was no hearing. Juvenile crime, I think you've probably heard this until I've sound like a broken record. Our juvenile crime statutes, known as the delinquency code, has not been updated since before 1993. In 1993, you were not seeing guns in kids' hands, driving down the road in stolen vehicles, shooting out the window, videotaping it. In 1993, the iPhone wasn't even invented back then. A lot of things have changed on the street. And I want to be very clear about this because sometimes people take away the wrong idea from me. I proposed 36 different changes to the Children's Code 2 years ago. And we proposed more changes this year and worked with some legislators who are very concerned about it as well. But I will tell you that at the end of the day, we have to do something about this. That doesn't mean locking them up and throwing away the key when they steal their first car, but what it does mean is getting them the family intervention, the behavior health things, all of that support right off the bat. Because right now they're not getting it. And so what happens is they don't have any consequences when they steal their first car. Then they do it again, there's still no consequences. There's no help on the behavior health side, so they don't learn anything except that they can get away with it. And then it escalates and they take a picture on social media with a gun, they get some like clicks. Now I know how to get popular, I'll go down the road and shoot out the window. It's extremely concerning what we're seeing, and we just have made no progress at the legislature as far as changing the laws to update them to meet with the times we live in. And I'm not blaming any particular legislators, I'm just saying that I think we need to have a sense of urgency, and for 3 years we have not gotten that, we have not moved the needle at all when it comes to that. We had a bill, I think it was SB 32, if I'm not mistaken, dealing with human trafficking. We need to change the definition of human trafficking so it's not just smuggling, but it's actually, we can expand it so that we can include what's going on, so we don't necessarily need the victims of that human trafficking to be the ones that have to show up, that law enforcement can be witnesses and testify to what they're seeing, because it's very hard to get people who are already so in fear to get them into court to testify. We didn't get a single hearing. It's the second or third year in a row it's been presented. Listen, we need more. When I talk about behavior health treatment, we have so many good people that are working on it, but this is a really big deal. When you talk about the revolving door, behavior health is a huge deal. Addiction recovery is a huge deal on that. And that's when we keep seeing them come out, they get arrested for open air fentanyl smoking up there in the International District. The next afternoon, they're out. And they've gotten no help unless somehow we've got to be convinced that they can join our PPD, our diversion program, and get them the help they need. But I will tell you, and it's just a lack of coordination. We need to have a real-time dashboard on the Department of Health that has a list of every single available bed in this state, whether or not they take Medicaid or private insurance. Because a social worker that shows up at the homeless encampment ought to be able to know how many beds that facility 2 blocks away has. We have so many good people working in this area, and they don't know, because we just haven't linked all the connections when it comes to technology and all the different entities. That needs to change, and we need to invest all the time more and more in that. I will tell you one last thing, and then I want to open it up for questions from the very hard-hitting editorial board. But one of the things we're seeing recently, we are trying so many cases downtown that they're running out of jurors. Literally, we've had to have a couple of trials mistried, or it's called a mistrial, because there wasn't enough jurors. That's how busy we are. right now at our office. Doesn't mean crime is escalating. It means law enforcement's doing a great job, and we're following up on every possible thing we can do and holding people accountable. That's why crime is getting better, if you ask me. Everywhere around the country, it's getting a little bit better. I'm telling you, we've seen some of those numbers because of the good work of law enforcement, the good work of people in my office who are busting their tail every day to take care of this community. With that said, I hope I've put some things in context, and I'm more than willing to answer any hard questions you have for me.
I wanted just to start, the last time we saw you, you talked a lot about juvenile crime, and you had a long list of bills that you introduced in legislative session last year, which was the 60-day session. At the end of that session, on the very last day, we saw that mass shooting in Las Cruces, where 3 teens are responsible for that. And there was talk of a special session. The governor even talked, maybe we're going to come back and do a special session about juvenile crime. That didn't happen. This session went through with almost no mention whatsoever of juvenile crime. What do you think happened there?
You know, listen, I think there are a few legislators, like Senator Trujillo up there, who's really working very, very hard to, sorry, on the mic?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, there were a few legislators who were really working very, very hard to try and get some things done. Bill was drafted. I know my office met with a number of legislators pre-session, but I think what happens up at the legislature is that people, unfortunately, they fall down on one or the other side. It's consequences, which I'm part of that, but also or it's just behavior health, or it's more help on the family intervention, and you can't do both, and I think you can do both, and I think we have to do both. Don't get me wrong. We have to be able to recognize, and look, somebody mentioned to me earlier today, we're batting cleanup for a completely dysfunctional CYFD, right? We've got a lot of issues in juvenile crime that run the gamut, but we're not doing a service to our kids. And I can't tell you how frustrating it is for me on the consequence side. For example, when a parent comes in who lost a child to gun violence from another child and says, what do you mean he's out when he's 21? Second-degree murder, convicted, but out when he's at 21, and he did this when he was 17. I mean, that's not right. That's why we tried to extend juvenile jurisdiction to 25. I mean, we've got so many different things in place. All I really want is a good, robust debate about these. These are really important issues. And we're losing too many kids to violence and death, and we're losing too many kids to 60 and 70 years in prison. That's crazy.
There was a DA in Michigan that made headlines, I think last year, for prosecuting the parents of a 15-year-old for a mass school shooting. Would you ever prosecute parents of juvenile offenders?
It depends on the facts. And listen, I'll give you, if a parent is working 2 jobs to try and support that family, or whatever, example, and doesn't know anything about the child's problem or where the child has been going, or just, that by itself doesn't make the parent a murderer if the kid ends up killing somebody. But I do think that there are certain, and that one up in Michigan is a clear example of a set of parents. I mean, he was reaching out, that particular case, I'm familiar with that, reaching out about what was going on to all kinds of people, clearly having mental issues, and his parents are buying him a gun as the answer. We have Benny's Law that recently passed. We're not afraid to use that. It's a really hard thing to do, is to prove that that parent was negligent in letting that kid get the gun. It's extremely difficult to prove that, especially if no one's talking, right? So if the particular set of facts and the law that's in existence right now applies those facts and it's a crime, I will hold everybody accountable that I can under the law, but I won't bring charges that are not justified, that I can believe, that I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury.
When you talk about your position on juvenile crime reform, can you just kind of just explain in general terms what you're in favor of? Is it as simple as stronger penalties in certain circumstances, or what all? Can you just kind of give us a rundown of your proposed changes?
Happy to. Several things. One is, I think that there are certain crimes that should be considered serious youthful offense, which makes it so that we can prosecute them as an adult. And that's, right now, the only crime that you're allowed to prosecute a child for as an adult is first-degree murder. I believe second degree should also be available. I believe that shooting at or from a motor vehicle or a dwelling should be a serious youthful offense as well. I believe, for example, that we ought to be able to extend the jurisdiction that we have, that a juvenile judge, that a children's court judge can sentence a young man or girl to, or young man or woman, for example, up to 25 years of age. That's not so we throw them away till they're in their 25 in a jail cell. It's so that we can keep an eye on them and make sure we're keeping an eye on them during that time frame, so they don't end up in my gun team, 18 to 25, as an adult now, where they are going to do hard time if they get convicted of that. I think that when you turn 18 years of age, you should no longer be hanging out in a juvenile facility. You should be, especially for those that are convicted of adult crimes or are about to be sentenced, on your 18th birthday, you should be over at MDC. You should be at an adult facility. I absolutely want more mental health and actual intervention. I think too many people who do not practice in the field of children's criminal court understand that, well, they're misguided thinking, well, of course we're helping those kids right off the bat. Right now, if you don't have a gun on you when you're a kid and you steal a car, drive it reckless throughout the entire street, have police officers trying to chase you so you don't kill somebody, you get caught. The D-home, because of how many beds are already full, won't even take you. You go, they tell the police officer, take them home to mom and dad.
Right.
That doesn't work. And they're not learning anything. They show up the next day and they said, don't do this again, and then they do the exact same thing, same result. So I do believe we need some consequences, but I also think in practice we need to actually have the mental health and the family intervention services really applied the second they get in trouble, right then and there. And we haven't been doing that.
And on that note, I think we may have discussed this more than a year ago. Used to be pretty much every New Mexico county had its own juvenile detention center. I remember the one in Chavez County was right there at the courthouse. So currently we have 4 county-operated juvenile detention facilities in New Mexico, one in San Juan County, one in Bernalillo, one in Lee, and Dona Ana. Everyone else has gotten rid of theirs. Is the shortage of beds that you talked about resulting in juveniles being released pretrial that shouldn't be?
I think so. I think after your third time you steal a car, drive it recklessly, and have a bag of fentanyl on your front passenger seat, that you actually have to spend a night in the D-home. I mean, seriously, but they don't. Yes, and it is a shortage of beds, and I'm not pointing my finger at anybody in particular, but we need to fund it. And the last thing, I mean, I'm going to get beat up for this. Oh, he just wants to build more jails for kids. That's not what I want. I want to be able to have kids
With
learn
services,
something.
not just jail, but have services there.
Yes, 100%. We don't have enough when it
We've
comes.
heard cases of not being brought for murder against juveniles because there was not a bed available. And various agencies share the detention facilities. They'll move around the state. But they had to wait for a bed to open to charge the 17-year-old with murder.
I know. I won't let that happen here in this county. I can tell you if someone needs to be charged for murder, we charge them for murder and figure it out. And depending on who I have to call in the middle of the night to get them to open it, I won't let that happen. I'm not going to allow someone who's that kind of danger to the community out there and just say we can't do it because we don't have enough beds. But it is a real shortage issue. And the only way you are now booked into the juvenile detention center in Bernalillo County is if you are involved in a crime involving a gun. That's the only time you're booked in. Otherwise, you're not, as a juvenile.
If other counties reopen their juvenile detention facilities, would that help Bernalillo County?
Well, I think the Bernalillo County, of course it would. I mean, we house juveniles from other counties in our facility here in Bernalillo County to help out. Everybody helps out as much as they can, but we don't have enough beds, and we do need to open up more. And whether or not it's the county at the county level or whether or not it's the state, one of the two needs, depending on the location, we need to do that.
Well, there are 3 detention centers potentially in the south that are being opened up, right, since they're closing down to ICE. Should those be turned into juvenile detention centers?
I can't speak of the logistics of whether or not they're facilities that would be adequate or good for young people, but we absolutely need more ability. It's not just to house them, it's to help them. It's to get them all the treatment they need and to make sure that they have all those services come in. Because even if a 16-year-old has majorly messed up, I think if we should be doing everything we can to get them back on the right foot and so that they're not ending up getting prosecuted as an adult someday for a horrific crime.
Anything more in juvenile crime?
What the governor's order for CYFD to intervene early on after birth if a child's born with drugs in their system, do you think that is that do you support that, and is that sort of the family intervention that you're thinking would help things, like especially if it starts early on in a child's life?
Let me jump to the second part of that first, and I'll come back to that. So what I mean by family intervention is the following, that when a kid gets in trouble, that we find out why let's just have some basic stuff. And JPOs, juvenile probation officers, work their tails off. They do, but their caseloads are incredible. But why is this kid out at 2:30 in the morning when he's 15 years old? Well, what's going on in the family? Why are we're not understanding all what's going on, and we got to figure out a solution so that you're not out stealing cars when you're 15 or hanging out with a bunch of 18-year-olds that are, for example. That kind of understanding, and let's say, listen, there's kids that don't have functioning parents, right? What are we doing to get them involved, get them whatever situation that stabilizes their life better, whether or not it's social workers, whether or not it's psychologists, psychiatrists, all of those but we have to start paying attention to them. We're not doing that. We're just saying, go home to mom and dad, show up for court in a week, and the judge goes, now don't do this again. That's not acceptable. And so when I talk about, and by the way, when the kid has a drug habit, let's get him the addiction recovery services that he needs. Let's start getting him working on the right path. And I was no perfect angel when I was young, and most people aren't. We all make mistakes. We know kids are going to make mistakes. That's how they learn often. But let's have them learn something that's productive. And we don't do that when we don't have any help for the family or for that kid. And that's what we need to focus on. As far as the specific, I've heard a lot of back and forth from the experts in that, what that does to the child. And I'm not exactly clear yet. I haven't been given all the facts on how that helps that child or how that hurts that child too by being taken away from their parent right away if they're born addicted. We see so much of that in my office. It is really, really sad. And we see, look, I could go on, and maybe it's for a different time when I'm here, about CYFD and the troubles. Good people working there too, but just not enough. And it's a real problem over there, and it spills over, and it gets involved in the criminal justice system. And there's a perfect example. Just the mere exposure to fentanyl will kill a kid. And it happens. It's really, really, and that addict may have no intention of hurting their child, but they're such an addict that they had to smoke that pill, and that child was exposed to it. Now that child's hurt or dead. It's hard.
Kayla, anything from you?
Not on juvenile crime, but I can go into another topic if we're ready.
Sure.
I said that I didn't have any questions for juvenile crime, but I would like to move on to another topic. Something that we hear a lot about is criminal competency. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's whether or not a person that stands on trial is able to stand trial, if they are mentally fit to do so. And so we see a lot of these cases where people are deemed incompetent to stand trial, and their case gets dropped and whatever else happens. What are we going to do to change that? There was a specific story I wrote about a man who was deemed incompetent for trial roughly 2 months before he stabbed a woman in an apartment complex. And a lot of people messaged me and said, what do we do about competency? And so I want to know what your thoughts are on that.
So competency is a real issue, obviously, in our criminal justice system. And unfortunately, we have more and more mental health issues in our society, and certainly it overflows into our criminal justice system. We obviously stand, and I also agree specifically with the idea that if someone cannot assist in their defense, they're not competent to stand trial, and we shouldn't be convicting someone if they're not competent. However, my office has been working on civil competency, and when I spoke earlier specifically about our competency team that we've developed, we're more and more focusing on pulling those people, working together with APD and BCSO that are the ones that are committing those low-level property crimes over and over again. And what we're trying to do is get them out of the criminal justice system, and they're really, they have real serious mental health issues, and that's why they're not competent. But we can't just let this continue. So we try our best to identify those folks, and our prosecutors will file civil commitments on them. And we've been successful in some of those, but here's the biggest problem: a lack of bed space. We come back to that again. It's a lack of bed space. You know, behavioral health, New Mexico Behavioral Health up in Vegas, they only have so many beds, and they don't have enough. And we need to focus on that, and we need to fill in the back end of behavioral health. It's not just the initial approach. It's after we get everything done, step by step by step, and now they're really in for the treatment. Do we have the bed space to get them in for the treatment? It's a real problem.
Did you tell us a couple of years ago that all misdemeanor cases are dismissed by the judge if the defendant is found incompetent to stand trial?
Yes.
Sam told us a couple of years ago that in criminal cases, if it's a misdemeanor and the defendant is found incompetent, that the charges are automatically dismissed, but not in felony cases. Can you elaborate a little on that?
That's correct. In misdemeanor cases, they are dismissed. That's basically.
And that's statewide, right?
I assume so. I can tell you that for Bernalillo County, but I assume yes. It's pretty much followed statewide. I think at the district court level, then it can go to a dangerous hearing and determine whether or not someone is a danger to themselves or a danger to others, and that's a different level. And then the question then becomes, if they are found dangerous, then can they be treated back to competency? And that's where people go up, behavioral health. And they are, some of them spend years there.
So has competency become a get-out-of-jail-free card?
Look, I don't think any of these people think of it. I don't think they have the cognitive function that they're thinking, okay, I'm just to declare competency issues by itself. I'm talking about the worst of the worst, where there is actual diagnosis done on every person that claims competency at the district court level to make sure, in fact, whether or not they are competent. It is reviewed by doctors that determine whether or not someone is competent or not.
And just to loop back on that topic, I had spoken with someone that said that the competency rate here is, or incompetency rate is a little bit higher, but then when we take it to federal authorities, they're deeming some people that we've deemed incompetent actually competent to stand trial. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Well, again, I can't tell you a specific fact pattern because I don't know a specific federal case. I think there are some times when we have found, when our experts who are reviewing and evaluating these individuals find them incompetent. I have heard of a case or two that has gone to federal court in a different matter, the same individual, and they were deemed competent. That's not to say that they weren't incompetent at the time when we were dealing with them, and they may be competent now when they're dealing with that federal case. People can be treated to competency. In fact, if you're treated to competency, then you come back and without a specific case fact pattern, I can't really comment on cases we're not involved in. So.
On a similar note, we had a couple of questions submitted about guardianship and elder abuse. What are your statistics about prosecution of elder abuse cases? And this question comes from Rick Black from clearjustice.org. And then also from a former journalist, Diane Diamond, who did our award-winning series on guardianships. She wanted to know, some of the same problems still persist about dismissive justices and predatory practices by guardians, conservators, and professional care groups. And what are you doing to address those issues?
I actually visited with a group of them, those advocates, last summer. It's a very big concern. Obviously, when it happens, it causes such destruction, the abuse of folks by abusive guardians, and it is really a real problem. We are a prosecution agency, so I need, law enforcement refers us our cases. So if they are absolutely investigated, we will absolutely prosecute them in every situation if we can prove it. Remember, we get cases that are investigated by law enforcement, whoever that law enforcement agency might be. They're referred to us. We take a look at it and determine whether or not the facts as they are brought out, do they violate the law? And if they violate the law, we absolutely prosecute them under the following circumstances, that we can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, because we don't file cases that we don't believe we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, because that's our burden. And we welcome that burden, but that's a burden that is required. And so I do understand the significance of that. I understand the numbers. I understand the Journal years back did a lot of stories about this very stuff. And I understand how significant it is. Whether or not we've seen a lot of cases that have been ready to go for us to file charges, or we haven't. But once we do, we won't hesitate.
There's a question from the room, and you ran, for some context, some commercials on television talking about how you would arrest ICE officials if they were to break the law here. The question from the room is, and there's no name attached to it, where are we with no ICE that are or have been ongoing in the three detention centers to house some of the worst of the worst?
Okay, so I can speak to why I said what I said, and I'm happy to talk with that for a second. Listen, I sent a letter to ICE, and perhaps with some folks it was a little upsetting to some folks. Some folks applauded it. But here's the deal. I've been a rule of law guy my whole life. I totally love the law. I've been a lawyer. I've been able to stand up and help people my whole adult life because of that, being a lawyer. It's what I do. But the rule of law is so important to me. And the idea that someone is above it is not the case. And as everybody knows, I've represented law enforcement in the past. I've sued law enforcement in the past. I represent I do a lot of cases at the DA's office involving law enforcement every day. I think the single hardest job in America is to be a cop. I really do. You have to lay down your life in any given second at the same time when you first confront somebody who's supposed to de-escalate. It's a very hard job. But what I'm seeing nationally and in Minnesota, whether or not it's in the regular news, whether or not it's in media, social media, the videos I've seen, it's not the country I grew up in, where you break a window and you say, show me your papers and prove to me the United States citizen because of the color of your skin or the accent you have. I don't know what training ICE is doing. I'm hearing some things. I heard some testimony in Congress, but I've stood up for the Constitution my whole life. The Fourth Amendment is really, really important. Search and seizure law is really, really important. And we have an actual law in our books that says nobody's going to be confined, restrained, detained against their will without lawful order. It's core for me. It's foundational. And I think most people in law enforcement understand who I am and what I'm about, but that is not acceptable. So we're a majority-minority state here in New Mexico. This is really, really important that we don't have people coming down here profiling someone because of the color of their skin and then just pulling them over. And so if the facts are there, if the identity is known, which isn't always going to be easy, I will absolutely hold ICE accountable under the law. I'm not going to just willy-nilly charge an ICE officer that I can't prove, but if it happens without reasonable suspicion, probable cause, or judicial warrant, you bet I will look at doing that stuff. Now, as far as the question specifically was about where are we on no ICE with the legislature just passed a bill, as we all know, that dealt with this issue somewhat. And we'll see what the results are, all that are. I mean, obviously counties can't contract with ICE folks now because of that law, and what is gonna happen in the future is a big question on whether or not ICE or private entities are just gonna buy themselves those facilities and how that all plays out. But I will tell everybody this. If you commit a violent crime in Bernalillo County, New Mexico, I don't care what your legal status is, I'm gonna prosecute you to the full extent of the law. And that's what we're supposed to. I don't look at your immigrant status. And by the way, I want to prosecute, if their immigrant status says they're not an American, then we're still going to prosecute them because I want to make sure that they're confined. Not something that they go over and they come right back in and commit another crime the same, a week later. I want to hold them accountable. So I'm very committed to making sure that everybody's, or let me put it this way, nobody's above the law, and that includes people with a gun and the badge too.
Jeff?
Yeah, sure, I'll do one. 10 years ago, New Mexico voters voted 87.2% in favor of a constitutional amendment which effectively got rid of cash bail. I wrote a column on this last fall saying cashless bail has been an utter failure in New Mexico, leading us to the Arnold risk assessment tool becoming our crutch. Do you think essentially the repeal of cashless bail has contributed to what many call our catch and release system?
Well, I appreciate the question. 3 years ago, I went up to the legislature and I asked them to change the state rules, if you will, the state statutes, so that it would reflect that depending on the type of crime, it would mirror the federal system. Depending on the type of crime, if you are accused of murder, that you have a rebuttable presumption at that point, just like the federal system does. The federal system says if you commit this type of crime, that is such a heinous crime in itself that there's going to be a presumption that you're going to stay in unless you rebut that presumption, show you can be safe to the community, or the community should not fear their safety based on you being released. Now, I understand why that cashless bail was passed. And what year did you say it was?
2016.
Yeah, I understand why, because oftentimes you would see individuals who just, the only reason why they were staying in jail before trial was because they couldn't afford bond. And if you were poor, you couldn't afford the $100 for the bail bondsman, and you sat in there for 4 months until you went to trial, or 6 months. And then anybody with money got out. So I get that. I think right now there could be some working, and I continue to do that, and I know my office continues to come up with ideas, working with the legislature about changing some of our statutes. But I will tell you, the legislature has had absolutely no appetite whatsoever to change anything about it. Rightfully or wrongfully, they feel very strongly, and certain people, that it's unconstitutional. And I respect people's views on this. It is a case of now it's in the New Mexico Constitution, but our numbers are going up. And the reason our numbers are going up is because we have prosecutors who continually train on this and do this and make sure we do everything from bringing witnesses that in the past weren't called. That's why our numbers are going up. We're holding more people pretrial detained that should be pretrial detained than at any time in the history of our office. I'm very proud of that. So while I don't necessarily disagree with the spirit behind the law, I am concerned, obviously, about people getting out, committing more crimes. And we know that has happened. We know it continues to happen. And we filed 1,500 pretrial detention motions last year or the year before. And I'm going to tell you, we don't file one of those if we don't mean it and try and argue to the judge that that person should be held. Judges don't always see it our way. They have a tough job, but nonetheless, we got to continue to work on the issue.
Prior to the constitutional change, any New Mexican was had the constitutional right to bail out of jail, whatever the crime was. The judge could set the bail. Do you think that removing that, well, in your time as 30 years as a defense attorney, did bail help people show up for jail for their court hearings?
Thank you for making me that old, but it was only
20 years.
20 years. I was a young lawyer. I was a prosecutor too, for 5 years, but it's okay. I got your question. Your question is, do I think that it's more people would show up for court if
And
they
stay
had
out of
bail on
trouble
them?
pre-trial, because they had money in the game.
One of the most frustrating things I see is people that completely disrespect court orders and don't care what they're told by a judge who lets them out and says, you will not do this, 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 and this, and you will do this, this, and this, and they don't do it. I don't necessarily know that the bail bond at this time, I think we've lost, I don't know how to say it, society's changed since when I first started practicing law. People used to be afraid of getting in trouble with the law. Not so much, some of them anymore. People used to be afraid of being in front of a judge, that judge had so much power. Not so much anymore. And I think we need to hold people accountable.
Well, in your 3 short years as DA, would that be helpful to get people to come back for the court hearings if they actually had to put $500 down as bill?
I'm going to be frank with you right now. I am not supportive of going back to the voters and changing it back the old way. I don't think that's a productive use of our time. They voted 84%. What was the number? 80-some percent. 87% the voters voted for that. We need to do a better job of the system that we have in place right now with that's concerned. I don't think we need to go back and change the Constitution again back to where it was, because that had a lot of inherent problems with it too. I just think we need to do better, and I know I can do better. I know my office, I'm sure, would all tell you we can do better. We're upset when we don't win every one of those motions, but our numbers have gone up, percentage-wise and actual numbers.
So on the vein of catch and release, which I hear all the time as a crime reporter, and I get a lot of complaints about it, I've written various stories about law enforcement agencies having operations, such as Operation Route 66, which for those that don't know is a multi-agency operation that was fronted mainly by the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office. Those were some of the stats that Mr. Bregman had showed earlier. And when we followed back with them, they said that, well, they had made so many arrests and gotten so many fentanyl pills off of the streets. A lot of people that they arrested were right back on the streets. And I believe the number was 1.2 or 2.4 days. And so my question for you is, what do we do now? I mean, we have the officers that are willing to make the arrests. We have the lawyers that are willing to take it to trial. But how do we stop this process from continuing?
We improve the behavior health system in this state, and specifically in this county and in this city. You know, I've been in a courtroom in the morning and heard a judge say, I would love to get you the help you need right now, and you've been convicted, but you know what? There are no beds available. That same afternoon, I've been in a facility, and there's 14 beds available. We lack a coordination. I was talking about that earlier. We don't coordinate well. We have so many well-meaning, hardworking people in behavioral health and addiction recovery, but we are not coordinated well, and we're spending, and Representative will tell you, we're spending a fortune on behavior health. We're not getting our bang for our buck for it because we're not coordinated. So let's start with the following idea. If you're a nonprofit, now I'm going to sound like I'm a candidate for something. If you're a nonprofit who works, and God bless each and every one of them who do such amazing work and help people with addiction recovery or just behavior health, mental health issues. Every morning you report into the Department of Health how many beds you have available. They know already whether or not you take Medicaid, or you just take private insurance, or you don't require any. You'll just help people. You reported, if you get state money, you should be reporting into the state health department, just saying, you know what, we've got 3 available beds today. And that's the whole state should be doing that. And so that on any given time, a real-time dashboard you can go up on, and that's social workers, I was mentioned earlier, at that homeless encampment, who the person just got arrested 2 days before, is back over there, just smoked another fentanyl pill, and for some reason is now ready to get help. We can get them the help they need. So that judge that sees that person for the 7th time for fentanyl possession can actually say, I'm sentencing you this time to this facility because they have beds right now available. We have specialty courts, whether it's young adult court, drug court, that are packed all the time. They're full. There's no vacancies. And I know how good some of those programs are. They work. But if we're not coordinated, if we don't have the opportunity, and we should, with all the technology we have, we should be able to say, there's beds over here, they're full, But there's a bed up in Sandoval County right now, and we'll drive you over there.
So with the behavioral health beds, being at a low capacity, what is the difference of results that you expect to see between Operation Route 66 and Operation Triple Beam? And to explain Operation Triple Beam, so that is another joint project similar to Operation Route 66, but now Bernalillo County Sheriff's offices are working with federal law enforcement agencies. This is to go after a bit more aggressive criminals, more violent criminals with harsher sentences. So what is the difference in the results that you're expecting to see between those two, given the lack of beds?
Well, I don't know if you know all of this, but I think you do. Route 66 was kind of my brainchild. We had the warrant fund money that the state graciously gave us to spend on picking up people who had outstanding warrants. My team helped coordinate that entire operation, our special agents, the CSU unit, and our prosecutor. We have a prosecutor on every single case that takes place in both of those operations now. We track every single case. The U.S. Marshal's Office contacted us to see if they could join it, and then because they were in it, they needed to switch the name, so now it's Triple Beam. It's fairly recently just came to an end. Not because it's not successful, it's just it timed out. We would hope that with the federal law enforcement piece of this, that we'd see more prosecutions by the U.S. Attorney's Office for federal crimes, felon in possession. And I know they're overworked, they got a lot of pressing issues as well, but I think they have 5 cases that they've decided to take. And we would overwhelm them if we said take every felon in possession, because first of all, they won't, and second of all, they don't have the capacity to do it. So, listen, it's not a perfect system, but if we want to help people, get them, first of all, 15 people in Route 66 were captured for murder. That's real success in itself. They were wanted for murder and they were brought to justice. A lot of violent people, a lot of violent felony warrants cleared, people arrested, brought in, had to go in front of a judge and answer, and some of them, many of them, are still in right now, waiting trial for whatever previous charge they had a warrant for. But every single morning, I get between 12 and 15 fentanyl cases referred to our office. Controlled, it's a 4th-degree felony for possession of a controlled substance. 12 to 15 cases. Many of them will be let out by 3, 4 o'clock that afternoon. They got arrested the day before. Many of them came in off of Operation Route 66. Law enforcement's doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing out there. They're arresting people who are committing crimes.
I have actually, to that point, a question from Sam Kerwin in the audience. He says many areas along East Central Avenue have, there are open drug use and open drug markets. Both are illegal. Why are they not arrested, prosecuted, and convicted?
Okay, I agree and understand with the frustration, but the real, hold on, can we go back up to CSU slide? Just because I want to know, I want folks to know what we have been doing on, sorry to make you guys switch around, but this kind of lays it all out there, because we have that right there. That was Operation Route 66 in just 8 months. Law enforcement made over 1,500 arrests. Most of that, I would say 95% of that was in the International District. 15 people were arrested on homicides, 598 offenders with pending criminal cases. 1,023 offenders were on supervision at the time of the arrest. Recidivism is alive and well, 100%. People are committing this open-air fentanyl smoking while they're out on conditions of release from a prior case that a judge has ordered them to do. And at some point, and I can't speak for other judges, if I was a judge, not that I want to be a judge, but if I was a judge, they come back in and they violate conditions of release, then you have to do things like revoke probation, right? That needs to happen. 1,397 warrants were cleared, 117,000 fentanyl pills taken off tons of methamphetamine, not tons, but 6,030 grams, 145 firearms recorded, 142 stolen vehicles. So what I don't want anybody to come, and based on the question, it's a good question, but based on the question, I don't want anybody to leave here thinking that law enforcement's not doing their work out there. They are. We are following up. Some of these 12 to 15 fentanyl cases that I get every morning referred to me, many of them, let's say it's a burnt, it's just residue of a fentanyl pill, which we can't test because it's too small. That case never even gets launched by us. We don't launch that case because we're only going to take cases and launch cases that can have an effect. We're going to divert a good portion of them to try and get them the help they need to stop doing what they're doing. Now, after they don't get the help after a couple times, we learn our lesson and then we file and continue to prosecute. We work in my office with HIDA all the time, which is a drug task force or created for the feds down around the state, and we work with them all the times on our prosecutions. It's not easy, but we're going to continue to be relentless on it. And it's very frustrating to a lot of people, especially in that part of town, because you still see so much homeless out there. You see businesses boarded up. I get it. You see neighborhoods destroyed in many ways. It's heartbreaking.
Another follow-up, sorry, from Sam Kerwin from the audience. With the proliferation of street cameras and parking lot cameras deployed by the city, county, and state law enforcement, has that helped convict criminals? Are they part of the flock system, which someone's going to have to explain to me? And how are you ensuring that law-abiding citizens' privacy is not being impinged?
Well, listen, there's a lot of technology out there that helps solve crimes. I mean, you never know which ones it's going to be. We have, as a community, spent millions on ShotSpotter, for example. The guns go off and it alerts the police, and they go out and they find the casings, and it helps. I can't put a value on how many times we use ShotSpotter in cases. It's probably not as much as people would think. The better evidence is the eyewitness that saw the person do it. That's what we rely on a lot more, still to this day. But ballistics and all the digital evidence now from people's phones and cell phones and videos off of phones. By the way, on a side note, juveniles, they love to video everything they do. Some of these are not that hard of cases to prove, but it's also so horrific. I mean, they're willing to videotape stuff that's bad. And so I'm very concerned always about people's privacy, and I don't want that intrude on anybody, but license plate readers, if used appropriately, can solve crimes and can find people. So there is benefit to much of that kind of technology, but we have to be responsible with it in law enforcement and as prosecutors.
And just to quickly explain to you guys what Flock is, this is one of the groups of camera systems around town. So we have the automated license plate readers, you have your general street cameras, and Flock is one of like 4 main companies that controls all of this and monitors it. So just to explain that for you guys, for anyone who is confused.
Thank you so much, Nicaila. I love that I have smart reporters who can explain these things to me. I have a really poignant question from Nanette Andazola. Her 17-year-old son was killed at the Coronado Mall. And her question is, for victims impacted by violent crime, especially when cases go cold, what is your office doing to bring renewed attention to those cases? More so, what are you doing to bring to justice for the victims and their loved ones, or to bring justice for victims and their loved ones?
I'm terribly sorry for her loss. It's awful, and it is. We prosecute crime, and we need to have the case in front of us that we can use the evidence to prove a case beyond reasonable doubt. Some cases, unfortunately, go unprosecuted because they go unsolved. But I hope that everybody in this community knows that we will never give up on a case, depending on the facts and the circumstances, and I think we have a proven track record of that. We have convicted 20, I'm going to get the number right, We've convicted over 24 people in cold case rape cases, for example. That's added by the fact that we have DNA, and DNA genealogy, I can't even say the word. You know what I mean. We have that ability. But listen, if I can legally prosecute someone, once we have the evidence, we will legally prosecute somebody. There's always statute of limitations, but not in what you just described to me in that case of a death. But I will hold people accountable. Like I said, this year, or last year, we convicted someone for raping 3 women between 1988 and 1991. We did that last year. So I want everybody to know we don't do all the investigative work, we prosecute the case. So if law enforcement has any new leads, any ability to close a case and send it our way and tell us they think they've got a provable case, we absolutely will look at that and prosecute that.
Following up on that, also from the Andaluza family, Michael Andaluza, he asks, can you explain why you believe a juvenile who has committed a murder deserves a second chance?
Well, I can understand their position and frustration. What's that? Oh, hi. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your loss. I truly am. And a second chance. So if we convict someone of first-degree murder that's tried as an adult that's a child, it's up to the judge to sentence them to 0 to life. Life in New Mexico means 30 years. 0 to life they can get up to. In a second-degree murder, currently the way the law stands, if they're found amenable, and most defendants, most juveniles are found amenable. I will tell you, you go back a decade or more before you can find any kid that wasn't found amenable. Amenable means that they're amenable to treatment, that they are amenable to treatment. They have an expert doctor who does a whole workup on them to determine whether or not this child can be amenable to treatment to be a successful citizen in our society. Now, we have not seen a case yet in my office in 3 years that any child was found was found not amenable. They're all found amenable, which means that if they're convicted of second-degree murder, for example, that means that they're going to be out for the most part at 21. That's the law. That's the current state of the law. And I've been trying to change that for 3 years. It's not right. I understand. I'm sorry for your loss.
On another note, we have an audience question that's not an author, there's no name. How has the DA's office and law enforcement been regularly checking in with Timothy Busfeld to make sure that he adheres to the conditions to his pretrial release, and has he been checking in person in New Mexico?
I can't speak directly to how many times he checks in or anything like that.
Timothy Busfield is sorry, we have an audience question wondering who he is. He's an actor, director who was arrested for inappropriately touching children on his set, a boy, I believe, and is slated to stand trial here. He was indicted by a grand jury.
Just to be clear, I have no indication that in any way he's violating his current conditions of release, and I'm not going to comment on this case further because it's in the middle of prosecution.
Well, you can't comment on that case. How do you feel that your office handled that situation? I mean, it was like a national attention. Do you feel good about like the job that you did?
I can tell you that I think my prosecutor that handles that case and her team are the best prosecutors in that particular field in the entire country. I am so proud of them every single day. They are so good at what they do. They are so caring. They have convicted so many POSs for what they've done to children. When it comes to them, I'm a rock. I think the world of them. Every single day, they have case after case after case of sick people doing sick things, and this is not directly related to that case, of sick people doing sick things to children. And the fact that they come back every single morning so motivated to help those survivors is truly remarkable and credible. And I think they did great, and they continue to do great.
And while we're on the topic of crimes against children, AI-generated child pornography is something that we've been seeing coming up a lot recently. And with AI being kind of a new world that everyone's trying to navigate, how is your office kind of navigating that?
So I am no expert when it comes to AI. Looking at me, you can tell I'm somewhat of a dinosaur. But I don't understand it all. I know it's changing dramatically, and it's changing every day dramatically. Our one AI policy I can talk about in our office right now is that our lawyers will not just use AI-generated pleadings and things like that without making sure that it is absolutely correct in every way, shape, and form. You know, I've seen other law firms and other DA's offices, actually not in this state, but others, that have messed up and filed motions citing cases that aren't even close because AI just simply got it wrong. So we are going to continue to look at AI. I'm sure the Attorney General's office is looking at that. That is one of the areas that they focus a lot on, is crimes and internet crimes against children, and they do good work on that. So I would think that they will have some guidance in the near future coming out for everybody to follow.
Sam, I had a question on a different topic, but do you think there's been long-lasting effects because of the DWI police officer scandal in terms of public trust of law enforcement? And what work have you done to reestablish trust between the prosecution and law enforcement side and just the public in general?
So, you know, I know it's been more than just a few, unfortunately, that police officers who've been linked to that whole scandal, that DWI scandal, and it is sickening. Sickening, the idea that any police officer would basically sell the badge. But I also will tell you that the vast majority, 99% of law enforcement in this state is amazing. Not only amazing because what they do every day, but they do it in a constitutional manner. There are always times when we can point to that we can point out somebody's done something wrong. And I'm not talking about the folks who've already pled guilty to crimes in the federal courts involving that DWI scandal. But police officers are amazing. Men and women who are willing to out there serve this community. I am so grateful for so many of them. Our office has police officers in it as well. We have 12 sworn officers. Our prosecutors, every single day of the week, in both Metropolitan Court and in District Court, work every day with with police officers. We recognize the job they do, and it's not easy. We have a great relationship. I have a great relationship with the heads of all law enforcement, whether or not it's our state police chief, our APD chief, our sheriff, our special agents in charge with the FBI. I work with ATF. I work with all of them, and we work well together. So despite what's happened, I want the general public to know that there's so many good police officers, and our prosecutors work really, really well with them, and it shows in the numbers. Look, I'm just going to go back to that. We've had a major DWI scandal in this community in the last few years, yet our numbers keep going up and our conviction rate's at 84%. That shows a bond that we're working together. And so I think people in this community, well, all I can tell you is that I work with police officers every day, and I support them, and I want this whole entire community to support every one of them that we can.
I'm going to end with 2 questions on your gubernatorial run. Just sneak them in.
And they told me, just for clear, they told me you're preparing for the DA, it's the DA thing only today. However, I'd love to talk about it.
Well, these are audience questions. These are audience questions. So one comes from Jeffrey Paul, and he asks, if you are elected, will you absolutely commit to serve a full 4-year term and not run for higher office during those 4 years?
This must be based on past experience with me or something. Yes. Yes, look, All right, you're going to get me to give my whole spiel on why I'm running for governor, if you want. I'll be happy to tell you guys that, but maybe it's better saved for the next time I come out.
Well, he is coming out again for that in May, I believe, or April or May, so we might save it for that. The other quick question was, if you are elected governor, and this comes from Sam Kerwin in the audience, if you are elected governor, who would you appoint to be DA, district attorney?
I have no idea. I will tell you this, I would never even think about that until, let's go win this thing, and then we'll worry about that. But I will say that there are so many qualified people in my office alone. It's really incredible. I do want to take this chance, because I'll kind of dive off onto a separate thing. I just want everybody to know that I work with some of the most amazing people. There's 330 of them in my office. They truly care about this community. They wake up every day. We are so blessed to have prosecutors that care so much, support staff, special agents, the people that go out every day and do process locate. You know how many people we have to find every day just to give them a subpoena to show up for court? I mean, the people that help with all of our IT inside of courtrooms. So many people that care so much. So I just want to say that Bernalillo County is very well served by the people that work in the DA's office, because they really kill it, and I mean it. Thank you. Thank you.
Nikayla tells me she has one last question for you.
So I have one last question for you. You showed crime stats that APD had, and it talked about how crime's gone down drastically. And APD has those similar, traits and everything like that. But when we talk about that, people aren't feeling like it's safer. So I just want to, ask as the final question, what would you say to all those people that still feel unsafe in their city? And how do we alleviate that? And what can you tell them to keep pushing on for a little bit more hope?
Well, listen, I think, number one, know that law enforcement, know your DA's office is working every day to accomplish that feeling. But if you don't feel safe, you're not safe, right? Because feeling safe is a quality of life. It's a very, very important thing. You have to wake up in the morning and feel like you can go take the walk down the neighborhood street. We have to get there. And this, I talked about crime stats here, but I want this, the last message I want coming out of here is thinking somehow I'm on a victory dance or saying that we've done what we need to do. We have so much more work we have to do when it comes to fighting crime at every level, whether or not it's guns in schools, whether or not it's juvenile crime, whether or not it's getting a hold of this scourge called fentanyl. And violent crime, domestic violence, too many people are driving drunk still. We know that. There's so much work to be done. We can do better. And so when people don't feel safe, they're not safe as far as I'm concerned. We need to get everybody feeling safer, no matter what zip code you live in, no matter what part of Bernalillo County.
So, in wrapping up, I just want to say thank you so much to Sam for being our guinea pig. And thank you, honestly, for the Andazolas for coming out. This is exactly the kind of community engagement we wanted to have, where people come with their questions and their stories, and they get answers that they hopefully are, that they really deserve. And as a mother of a 5-month-old, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I really hope that you guys will consider coming out for our future series. I think we have Duke Rodriguez coming on the 30th of March. We have a lot of other folks lined up after him, and this is hopefully the beginning of a lot of community engagement. We really want you to feel comfortable coming to the Journal, and we want to be the place where you think of to get your questions answered. Thanks again, Sam, and we hope to see you all again soon.